Thank you for joining Reading Horizons today for the final part of our online Dyslexia Summit, Essentials for Supporting a Child with Dyslexia. If you have not officially registered for this presentation, be sure to take a moment to sign up at readinghorizons.com/webcast. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can do that right now with a quick mouse click. Subscribe to our channel where you can see previous webinars and other great content from Reading Horizons. We are incredibly fortunate today to have Dr. Richard Selznick with us for this presentation. Dr. Richard Selznick is a psychologist, nationally certified school psychologist, assistant professor of pediatrics, school consultant, and Wilson certified reading instructor. Dr. Selznick is the author of 3 books, The Shutdown Learner, Helping Your Academically Discouraged Child, School Struggles, A Guide to Your Shutdown Learner's Success, and the 2015 release of Dyslexia Screening, Essential Concepts for Schools and Parents. Dr. Selznick has presented to parents and educators internationally as far as Dubai and Abu Dhabi and throughout the United States. A down-to-earth presenter who looks to present complex issues in non-jargon terms, Dr. Selznick strives to help parents get it. Dr. Selznick has a particular passion and interest for helping parents understand dyslexia and related reading disorders. And now we are pleased to turn the time over to Dr. Selznick for his presentation, Essentials for Supporting a Child with Dyslexia.
You know, I really appreciate Reading Horizons and sponsoring this and Decoding Dyslexia Utah, both wonderful organizations. Reading Horizons puts out amazing stuff. You know, I go on their website a lot. I would really encourage everyone to do that. And Decoding Dyslexia Utah and the whole Decoding Dyslexia movement, it's just an amazing grassroots effort, parent-based. So what we're going to be talking about this is going to be essential things that you should be thinking about as teachers, as parents, just kind of what, in a sense, I like to say what should be kind of knocking around in your head as you're working with a child, either working with a child with dyslexia or parents of, I mean, I had parents in this week to see me. I had sort of mentioned them to you earlier during the keynote. And I guided them on some, and the kid was in the room, 7 or 8-year-old child. And I guided them on some things that they can do at home. And the kid got all on board. He was all excited, you know, and the parents were like, thank you, you know, no one's telling us what to do at home. So that's kind of my mission, not just what to do at home, but to try to give you some things that you should be thinking about with these kids. You know, what should you be saying to yourself either as a parent or a teacher? I mentioned earlier that, you know, literally I have presented in, you know, Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Alaska and all over the, you know, really all over the world. And people have contacted me from Australia, sent me their kids' material. And a mom contacted me from South Carolina who was hours away from, you know, in Philadelphia area, there are a lot of, you know, professionals who are doing this where I am now. But, you know, you could be a mom 3 hours away from from a local university center, and it's, you know, it's hard to get guidance, and you know, so that's what this is about. I like to speak to you. My mission is to cut through the jargon as much as we can, to try and speak to you in plain language. You know, because it's sort of like the more jargony stuff, the more sophisticated stuff, it doesn't sit well with me, so how can it sit well with you, you know? I want to talk to you a second about the trajectory of the positive. You know, I've been in this business long enough to know that what many of you as parents, and if you're listening out there, you know, I know, Reading Horizons is sending this out literally around the world. You know, you could, effectively, when your kid is struggling, it's like you're going through a storm. You know, it's a really tough period of a kid's life. You know, when you see your second grader hating school, like the boy I showed you this morning. You know, or you see a teenager who is shutting down, as I talk about in my book, Shutdown Learner. You know, these are kids that are discouraged, that shut down. But there's a trajectory of the positive that I think is really important for you to keep in mind. One of the articles that we have out on our table is a boy named Danny, who I think about it. And I'm saying this to you to kind of keep in mind, in a sense, there's a biblical phrase, this too shall pass, right? And there's a this too shall pass quality to these kids that, there is the positive side. A mom came to me during the break and told me her boy was struggling with dyslexia and is now doing some amazing, up in the mountains, he's doing all this EMT work. A boy named Danny was one of my Hall of Fame dyslexics, and he got to the other side. He went to college, he's now working in real estate. Another girl named Rachel, she was an incredible self-advocate. She came to us very early on to get training, Wilson, everything else, significant dyslexia. But she early on knew how to advocate for herself. And she went to graduate school from middle school to high school to graduate school. She spoke up and she knew how to advocate for herself, and there's another side to this. So I had a mom contact me recently about her daughter who was dyslexic, passing all, do they have the praxis exam, right? Isn't that the national teacher's exam? That she recently passed her praxis exam and how proud she was. So my message to you is that there is another side. And I would say for many, many of the kids, because they do have these gifts, they do have these qualities, and if we can really emphasize their strengths, you'll see them get to the other side. The theme here is our essentials, and I have to say that I do have to go one kid at a time. It's easy for me to put down on paper, oh, your child should get twice a week Orton Gillingham, go for Wilson training or whatever in the local private tutoring. Well, what if they can't afford the 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever it is? What if, the logistics don't allow it? Two parents are working and they can't get the kid to a center. There are a lot of what ifs that have to be considered. So while I'm going to go through essentials, it's family by family, kid by kid, and we have to keep in mind it almost sounds cliche-ish that each kid is unique and each family is unique, but we do have to kind of know, where they're coming from, what their resources are, what's their capacity to follow through, what are things like in the family, things like that. All right, how many of you moms out there, this is confessional time, how many of you moms and teachers, I was a former teacher, I did this too, have yelled at your child in time? Yeah, come on, let's put our hand, yeah, come on, yeah. So, essential number one, gang, I know you weren't expecting this at a dyslexia conference, but for me it becomes kind of like one of the big essentials. Homework, I have this image of homework. Like on the East Coast, I have an image that the heat starts to rise on the East Coast around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30, 3:45 when the kid gets home. Why do you have for homework? Homework, And so the heat temperature starts to rise in the household. And the kids, I don't want to do my homework. And they start yelling, and there's a lot of tension around it. Now, I ask you this. So then I have the image of we have the East Coast, and then this heat temperature continues across the country. So it hits Utah a couple hours later, but you got a lot of temperature rising. And look, as a teacher too, I'm not going to ask teachers to raise their hand on this. But kids push our buttons, right? You can't help it. I remember how they certainly push my buttons and have pushed them. But as a parent, I'm trying to speak to both parents and teachers through this talk. Ask yourself this. When you're yelling at the kid, when was the last time the kid said, "Ma, thanks for yelling. I get it. I really need to be doing my homework. No problem. I'll get down to it. Keep yelling at me. It's okay." And then, then there's the dance, you know, if you have a spouse, I'm not going to go there. If you have a spouse, you know, there's the, you're too hard on him, you're not hard enough, you know, that kind of thing going on. So what I would encourage you to do, I'm not saying, the message, the takeaway from this isn't, oh, poor babies, let's go soft on them and anything goes. That's not the message. But just think about turning down the heat. Homework isn't that important, really, is it? I mean, I know teachers, come on. But that's one message, one essential. Essential number 2. This goes to moms, mostly moms, but it also goes to teachers, and I call it the Goldilocks factor. You all, how many remember Goldilocks and the 3 Bears? Come on. All right. You remember the soup could be too hot, the soup's too cold, or the soup's just right. Now, what's this about relative to dyslexia? What it's about is that, you know, there's a lot of rescuing going on out there. There's a lot of mom, I'm saying mom, I apologize, the dad, you know, what can I tell you? Mom over-involvement sometimes. And you know, human nature, this is my, and I would like to say this to, you know, to the people listening, I'm presenting these as my perspective. I'm presenting this as someone who's been in the field for a long time, as well as a child advocate in a sense, and a psychologist. But I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist, but I'm basing this on what I know of the research too. But moms are out there rescuing their kids, and in this day and age, there's a lot of what I would think of as, you know, over-rescuing sometimes, and, you know, human nature being what it is, hey, if you can take my bags for me, go right ahead. And the kids sit there and go, Mom, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do my homework. And Mom, you got to get the homework done, let's go, let's go, let's go, you know, like, whoo. So I try and help parents. I give them this. Now, this is why it's one family at a time, one kid at a time. But my guideline is a 10% factor, a 10% factor. Tell parents, you know, be 10% involved. And that, you know, what I find is kind of interesting that parents get that. Moms go, okay, I could do that. That's kind of encouraging you to be somewhat like a homework consultant on this. But another piece of this, and this applies to teachers, this is very important, I think, and it's tied into this. You have to ask yourself, what's the kid's zone of competence for a given task? Think about that. Zone of competence for a given task. So if the kid can lift 10-pound weights pretty competently, then we don't really need to help, right? But if we're putting a couple more pounds of weight on top of it to 15, it's not fair, is it? It really isn't fair. It's not in their zone of competence. With dyslexic, I'm bringing this around to dyslexia, but it applies to all kids, frankly. Really all situations in many ways. But what, you know, if I ask a dyslexic kid who's in, like some of the ones I showed you this morning, like that poor kid, well, let's say 2nd grade reading level, and they're handed these worksheets. Oh, don't get me started on worksheets, folks, please. I call it worksheet burnout disorder. They got it's a new syndrome I want to get in DSM called WBD. Worksheet. These kids are getting these worksheet burnout things. They get stacks of them that many of the kids truly, especially the dyslexics, can't handle. So then my 10% factor has to go up, doesn't it? Because if I can't do the worksheet, it's not in my zone of competence. I need help. But you as parent, you as teacher need to kind of judge that a little bit. So that's why the Goldilocks piece of this, is it too hot? Am I too, and ask yourself, and same with teachers. You know, teachers are, you know, you're nice people. You didn't go into this business because you're not nice people. You're nice people. You want to help kids. But maybe you're helping too much. Or maybe I'm not helping enough. Okay? You get the idea? That's the Goldilocks factor. I think it's a big essential for dyslexic kids. So that question of what's the zone of competence is really important. My pantheon of deceased researchers, I love my deceased researchers. Jean Shaw, I would look up and put in stages of, Google stages, not now, stages of reading development. Education.com, I know, has a good example of it. I'm sure Reading Horizons mentions stages of reading development. Dr. Chall guided us, and we use this at our center literally every day of our professional, lives. It's a model that helps you as teachers and as parents. And I think that the takeaway for you is it guides next step thinking. So let's say I evaluate it. Let me run you through stages real. Think about the stages like you're riding a bike. Okay? She called it stage 0. It probably should be called something else with stage 1. But stage 0 is effectively I'm not on the bike stage yet. I don't know how to ride a bike. So I've got to do these activities to get to be riding a bike, okay? Stage 1 typically corresponds to first grade, typically for normal development, like the smooth road kids we talked about. And you get out of stage 1 by the end of first grade with normal development, right? But with dyslexic kids, what happens? They get stuck in stage 1, typically. They don't pass through it easily. But you can identify where a child is. So I'll evaluate a kid, right? I'll test a kid, and I'll turn to my educational coordinator, and I'll say something like, kid's in early stage 1. Oh, she'll be like, oh, cool. I know exactly what I need to do. Latter stage 1, the kid's starting to move into, his decoding skills are starting to kick in a little bit. He's moving into stage 2. Now, normal stage 2 development corresponds from the beginning of 2nd grade, right, to the middle of 3rd grade, normally. And stage 2 is the fluency development stage, when you're on the bike and you're riding along. Again, dyslexics, sometimes they don't even make it into stage 2. That's what's so heartbreaking. That kid Isaiah that I showed you earlier today, he's 14 and he's still in low stage 1. Still in low stage 1. Stage 2 is a wonderful stage because what you need to do in stage 2 is a lot more of it. Practice, practice, practice. Read a lot more out loud. It doesn't have to be just a fluency program. You could be reading, easy enough Dr. Seuss or whatever those kind of books are that are practicing fluency, okay? That's stage 2. Stage 3, I'm going to stop at this point, with the stages, is nirvana. We have reached decoding nirvana. Because stage 3, frankly, normal development means like 3rd grade through like middle school. It's like 5 years, they go to high school. But really, you're done. Your work is done. Not that you wouldn't be doing comprehension and vocabulary and all this other stuff, but you're done as decoding instructors. You're done, because in stage 3, the kid's clean. Now, I'm not being depressing about this, I hope. I don't like to depress you during lunch on a nice Thursday. But it's really tough for dyslexic kids and people to reach stage 3. I know adults who are very successful adults, who are doing great, who are like the one I mentioned this morning, who, he's an executive, but he was not in stage 3. But that's the goal. The goal is to get your kids into stage 3 of development. So if I evaluate a kid, and I say to my educational coordinator, I got a stage 3 kid, he needs help with vocabulary and comprehension, got it. Next step thinking, you see? I would encourage you to read, go back to that 1 second, sorry. I would encourage you to read, she's very readable, Dr. Chall. It's not, abstract stuff. And she talks about the value of decoding emphasis work, even if she didn't, in her writing, mention, it was back in the day. The 70s, they weren't as much talking about dyslexia like they are now, okay? This is Shutdown Learner. And I'm not, I'll put in a plug. Go on my website, shutdownlearner.com. Why not? I'll put in one plug. That'll be the one. This is the mission. Getting kids to not have their battery shut down. I see it all the time. Listen, it's hard to run these races on that 45-degree incline. And again, the message is not, oh, poor baby, but it's understanding. So when I see these kids coming in, And you can see it. They're battered. I can see it in the middle of the testing that I do. I start off the day, hey, kid, you know, we get started with the testing. Hey, Dr. Selznick. And then about a half hour in, I can see the battery going like this, draining rapidly. So you can imagine every night the battery draining. So you have to find ways to champion the kid. Teachers, in the old days, we used to have, this is going to be one of those reveals again. Back in the day, we had board monitors because we had real blackboards. You know, what's I don't even know what it is, the modern equivalent to the blackboard eraser kid. You know, go clean the erasers. I used to love going outside and throw the erasers against the wall, you know what I mean? And clean the, people don't even know what I'm talking about. The old you know, blackboard erasers. And that was you were a monitor. But you have to find ways to get the kids to feel good about themselves. You know, I'll say to kids something like this. You're the smartest kid I've tested all day. And the kid, you can see the kid like this. The kid doesn't know it's 9 o'clock in the morning. He loves it. He walks out going, I was the smartest kid he tested all day. Or, you're the smartest kid I've tested in a week. I'm not lying. You know what I mean? It's like you're finding ways to champion the kid. Wow, you're the best plant waterer I've seen in a long time. You're the best. You water plants like nobody's business. These kids need that. And I'm going to talk about fairness in a second because teachers get a little hung up about fairness. So he needs to be championed. She needs to be championed. They're feeling, trust me, they're feeling underneath it. Even if they're soccer stars and they're this, that, or the other, they're feeling insecure about these things. They don't feel like they measure up. So if you can find that you're the best plant waterer kid I've seen in a long time, wow, look at you water those plants. He's going to come in like Mrs. Jones is the greatest teacher ever because she thinks I'm the best at watering plants that she's ever seen. In my book, there was a man who was a photographer who helped me with some of the work in Shutdown Learner. And a teacher in high school said to him, you know, and he came from a very tough family situation, and he was very discouraged, shutdown learner style person. And a teacher said to him, you know, Patrick, you've got a great eye. You should be a photographer one day. Guess what? That was it. Stayed with him the rest of his life, turned his life around in a lot of ways, helped him to sort of believe in himself in a way that no one had before. I know you all do, but find those specifics. I think if that's an essential. If you can make it specific, like the plant watering image, you find that their batteries recharge. Now again, I know multisensory instruction is simultaneous, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, but these are, on average now, the dyslexic kids that we are talking about are very spatial and very visual in thinking. So this guy, look at him off to the side. You know what he's doing there? Now that doesn't look like much. It doesn't look like much. Stick figures? I had him in front of his mom tell back a story that he had read during a testing I did with him. Because I knew he remembered the story. I said, okay, Jim, map it out visually. I drew a quadrant. That's a nice thing that you can do with these kids, quadrants. You could do this with word problems. If you look at most, even math, because these kids have trouble with word problems, by the way. If you map it out with word problems, every word problem has a story. Well, there were 12 ducks on the pond. 3 flew away. 4 more came back. How many were remaining? Well, beginning, middle, and 4 parts. Chapters have typically, especially in chapter books, novels, they have, you know, each chapter has kind of a beginning, middle. So this story, he's telling about. This was on an informal reading inventory that we did an hour before. And I said, hey, show your mom it in visual, map it out in visual terms. And he loved it. Get these kids sketchbooks. You know those kind of sketchbooks that you have that are not lined? Let them retell stories in visual terms. Oh, I'm not an artist. Make stick figures. Don't worry about the artistry, you see? But encourage them to be doing visual thinking. Vocabulary. The presenter earlier talked about, I like old school index cards. I know we've got flash apps and everything else, index card apps. Get old school index card. I still remember my daughter practicing vocabulary in high school, and the word was supine. Not that many people know what the word supine means. I don't think I would have known it. But I remember she had a pig, a stick figure pig on its back. Ah, supine. I still remember it because I have a visual anchor. These kids need visual anchors, okay? It's a really big essential. And most teachers know about mind mapping. I would encourage you to be thinking about that. There's a good software called Inspiration, or Kidspiration is the younger one. I'm not here to market products. There's a good software tools that mind map. Next one. All right, teachers. I get this a lot, you know, because, look, I don't want to overhelp these kids, but I get the, well, it's not fair. If everybody's got to do this and he only gets 5, listen. Is it fair to be running a race on a 45-degree angle with weights around your ankles? That's what it's like for these kids. Kids get it. Talk to them in plain language. Listen, folks, you know, I could model it. Talk to the kids. You know, Johnny has a little, you know, and parents will understand that, has a little trouble with reading. He can't read as quickly, and we're going to let him do this while you're doing that. And kids, okay, fine, okay, good, they get it. Again, go back to Goldilocks. Don't overdo it, but watch the I think you get a little, I find a little too worried about it being fair for everybody. Again, remember that it's not fair for these kids in so many ways, okay? Next one. It's so funny how every essential becomes my biggest essential ever. It's like, oh, that's a big essential too. So this is this could be my biggest bugaboo in a sense, or, you know, I get dyslexia. Most of you know what kryptonite is. Superman, it kills it killed Superman's kryptonite. Open-ended writing is dyslexia kryptonite. It kills them. They can't do it. While we focus on the reading, it is really the writing that is the dreadful thing for them. They find it agonizingly painful. And their product is not something that they feel very good about. A couple points. You might want to Google later on. Some of you may remember, some of you may not remember. It's an old school method called language experience approach. You may have learned it in your graduate school teaching. Language experience approach was a wonderful method back in the day where a teacher would have an easel board in front or a whiteboard, whatever, and the kid would tell the story to the teacher. You know, we went on a vacation. Kids, you know, most of these kids can tell pretty good stories. We went on a vacation to Mount Rushmore. I saw this, I don't know, teacher's taking down every word. That becomes his story. You can do a lot with those stories. You can cut up the words. You can put them in word boxes. You can all kinds of spin-off activities. I can't get into it now, but there's a lot that you can do. Language experience becomes a nice way to bridge it with these kids because they truly can't write. Now, am I saying that these kids should not learn how to write? Of course not. But with dyslexics, and this might be a little controversial to what's going on out there in education land, that you need to be focusing on the sentence level with simple sentences. Most of the kids that I work with, who I evaluate, have no idea what a sentence is. They really don't. They randomly put in periods like, well, right. They'll write a paragraph, period, like that. I would encourage you to be focusing at the sentence level. Work for mastery of a sentence, and then build on that and get a little bit more complex sentence. You know how it goes, a compound sentence. Master that for a while. Ultimately, maybe it's going to take you a year. I don't know. It could take a year and a half. You're going to have the kid working toward the writing of one paragraph, 5-sentence paragraph, because otherwise it's like zone of competence that we talked about before. It's asking a kid to be lifting 20-pound weights when he can only lift 10. Okay? So that's my encouraging to remember that that this really is a killer for these kids. The other killer are big words. And I'll say to kids, you're a smart kid, you're the best plant waterer I've had in a long time, and you're the smartest kid tested, but you've got a little bit of a problem. And I'll say just like this, something like this. You've got a big word problem. You got a big word disability. Kid goes, yeah, I do, you're right. I love that. The kids get it. They know they have problems with big words. Dyslexia, in many ways, this is why I talk about jargon, is a problem with big words. When do big words show up a lot? 3rd grade. Words like porcupine, fantastic, I don't know, who can read those? Diaphanous, cacophony, my God. So when the kid is reading about the prickaprinnies, oh, the prickaprinnies were in the forest. It's the big word problem. So what I show you off to the side is the essential with dyslexia is preview them. Give the kid the lay of the land a little bit. Work on the big words ahead of time. Let me try to pull you off to the side, not in front of people, because we're going to talk about it in a second. You don't want them to feel a sense of embarrassment, but it's going to be, let me go over some of these big words with you. You're going to face some pretty tough sledding in this story they're going to read. I have parents doing this all the time. I train parents to be thinking about reading the worksheet before time, looking at the story, and, if the word's 2-3 syllables, not, low frequency words like porcupine, they've done studies of this. You can go through literally all of elementary school and never hit upon the word porcupine. So what do you do then? You're sunk unless you've internalized the code. So they need help with the big words, okay? Next one. You've got some great people here talking about technology. I think technology is an essential role for kids, but caution. I've been using Dragon, not because of Dragon naturally speaking, for many years, dictating. I use it because I dictate my reports that way. And parents and kids will get all, and schools will do this too. Oh, we're going to put the kid on Dragon. Or we're going to let the kid do Learning Ally. And I love Learning. I refer to Learning Ally and those kind of things all the time, the assistive technologies. You need, even though these kids are more digitally native, that concept than a lot of us, they take to it, they still need more hand-holding than you'd realize. They need to be kind of trained in the value of it, because what I have found is they'll get excited about something like Dragon naturally speaking for dictating, when they write, and in about 2 days they give up. I don't like it anymore, it's too hard, it was dumb. They need a lot more hand-holding, a lot more kind of walking through it, okay? But assistive technology is, I will jokingly say, it's a great time to have a learning disability. 20 years ago, you just didn't have these kind of things around. Last one, it almost goes without saying, but in my book, I show a couple of cartoons of kids being snickered at. And look, I know teachers are sensitive to this stuff, but you can't control it. A kid can ooh, little face, ooh, you're so stupid, or, ooh, she reads like that, or anything, those kinds of things are really, very hurtful to these kids. So if you can work toward establishing that tone, and in my classroom, we don't make fun of people. Everybody's got, I'm sure you're doing a lot, but I'm just reminding you, because I think that underneath this is a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment, and, we have to be aware of it. So those are my, the essential of all essentials. Even though everyone was the essential of all. They said, you'll like this. I don't think you guys are going to be replaced by technology. I still think it's the relationship that matters. That's why I mentioned before about, the watering, wow, that's where the energy comes from. In our tutoring center, we don't call it tutoring, we call it learning therapy. I would stack up our learning therapy to almost any cognitive behavior therapy program out there. In that, the kid comes out feeling, wow, it's like their flowers are getting water not just because of the Orton-Gillingham method, but because of the relationship or the Wilson, whatever. You know what I mean? It is something in the energy. And I think that all of you play a really, really key role in that. So I want to encourage you to be thinking that way. I don't know what time it is, but I know we're going to open it up to some questions. And now we could, you know, loosen it up, right? Are we allowed to do that? Okay, good. So I got the high sign. So I'd like you guys to react or have some questions. I think we have microphones, hopefully. Yeah? Yes?
Why doesn't our school educational psychologist test for dyslexia? And why is the word dyslexia not mentioned in the evaluation report?
Start with a real tough question, huh? Thanks a lot. I don't know. I think that it varies professional to professional. There's somewhat the dirty secret of this is that it's not like dental school and it's not like medical school. I work in a health system. So there are medical doctors around me, and I could line up 10 different professionals, and we're all going to have 10 different views of the kid. I can go from one school who's doing this to another school who's doing that, and their belief systems are different. Their trainings are different. There's no you're saying an educational psychologist. In a sense, I'm an educational psychologist, I guess. I don't even know if I am or not, to be honest with you, because it doesn't even exist as a category in where I am. What I'm saying is that my experience, because I came up through a certain lineage, the Temple Reading Clinic, and I've been oriented to reading and reading disabilities, that as a psychologist, I'm sensitive to these issues. There are many psychologists who came up through whatever university or other experience that, yeah, we have different philosophy. A lot of people don't even believe in or think it exists. On top of that, you have school code. Excuse me, I'm getting all excited. You have school code where, they have to be cautious. I do pride myself on being honest and on playing with parents, but I have that luxury too. Like I can sit back in my office and talk to you about what I think. I think it's a lot harder for a school professional because, there's a lot more kind of regulation around them, I think, that may not allow them to speak in that kind of plain language. Those are the things that come off the top of my head on it. And I think some of it's education and experience, that they need to do more of these kind of trainings and more exposure to it. Wait, hold on. I think we need to have microphones, right?
I just kind of wanted to add to that because I know I'm a special education teacher, and it's not really that we are diagnosing or trying to find out if a student has dyslexia. What we're trying to do is see if they actually have a reading problem. Dyslexia falls under the learning disabilities. We can look for those key things that would make us think that they have dyslexia, and we can use interventions and curriculum that actually focuses on those things. But we don't diagnose as teachers.
What's your first name?
Julie.
Julie. It's a really interesting point. And this was almost, it should have come to me earlier, but it wasn't all that long ago that I had a kind of revelation, I think, and I'd like to hear what you think about this, because I try to talk to parents about the difference between private outside testing and school testing. In a sense, Julie's exactly right. They aren't diagnosing. Like we call them in New Jersey child study teams. Each state has their own way of doing it, special ed teams, right? Their job, as I understand it, and I've been on that side of the fence, so I think I understand, is not to assess for dyslexia, it's to determine whether the child is eligible for service or not, really. It's to determine whether they're eligible for special education or not. That is different than diagnosing dyslexia. Their job is eligibility assessment, right? Yes?
Sorry, just playing off of that as well. We just had an IEP meeting, and the mother was like, does he have dyslexia or doesn't he have dyslexia? And we said, well, dyslexia is a specific learning disability in reading, and yes, there's a lot of evidence that says that that's possible. But does it affect his academic involvement in school? No. So he doesn't qualify for special education, but he does qualify for something like a 504, where we can make accommodations.
Yeah.
Is there a big difference between a specific learning disability in reading and dyslexia?
Oh boy, this is being filmed worldwide. Come on, give me a break. They're gonna throw darts at me and they're gonna like, how dare he say this? Oh my God, please don't do it to me. Specific learning disability is determined by state standards, isn't it? So the state of New Jersey has its own criteria for specific learning disability. State of Utah has its, standards. Then I go to the definition of dyslexia. Again, this is why it's not dental school. Sometimes I wish it were, that everybody would agree. Okay? I used to have brown hair. But and it even goes back to what I talked about this morning, that even when I, who consider myself an expert of sorts in dyslexia, sometimes I have the kid in front of him and I'm like, I don't know. And I don't mean that I'm being insecure. It's more that, these weighing of variables, the parent, you're weighing variables. And then there's this other part of it, which I think the schools, because of the regulations and everything else, like I said this morning, dyslexia is not a score. So just because a kid's shaking out, and average range, average range, average range, that kid could be dyslexic. But that's a problem that we have, because the parents are pressing in on the schools to give us this label in a sense. We want to know, and the schools are looking at the scores, and I'm sitting there going, look, qualitatively, I see his writing sample, he's dyslexic, that's all I need to know. How'd I do? Did I answer the question, sort of? All right.
Just a comment.
Only a good one.
I hope so.
All right.
I think both terms are really an effort to try to identify a set of characteristics that illustrate that a student has difficulty with reading. And we classify things in the world because the hope is by classifying, it gives you some sort of prescriptive direction as to what to do. And whether it's a specific learning disability or dyslexia, whatever we call it, what's important in the end is, does it give us some increased specificity as to how we go at trying to treat the problem or the need?
Well, what's your first name?
David.
David, I am on board with that 100%. I think about it all the time in my professional life. I frankly, and I know that it goes against the grain of some of the thinking with the grassroots movements. I'm not the biggest. I've always been, as a psychologist, an uncomfortable labeler. I just am. I don't like. There's a phrase that I learned very early on about calling labels are for cans, and that stayed with me. I do like to describe. I do like to be as descriptive as I can possibly be in my evaluations, because I think, as David is saying, that guides the next step thinking. So if I'm saying the kid has decoding deficits and he's in stage 1 of reading and other things like that, well, then I'm not having him do comprehension and stage 3 work, But I also understand that people seem comforted by labels, and it kind of gets their mind around it. I had a kid recently, his name was Giovanni, and cutest little kid. And he's like, Giovanni, you're dyslexic. He's like 8 or 9. You have dyslexia. And he turns to his dad right in the session. He goes, see, I told you I wasn't faking it. I was like, and the dad was like, and I had a kid the other day. He goes like this. A little kid goes like this. I said to the kid something like that, and the kid goes like this. And I like to think it was one of the essentials, too, that comes to mind. I like to think of us that these kids need a kind of pit crew. You know what I mean? Like in racing, the driver's driving the car, but he's got the people putting on their tires and they have a pit crew. Well, that's what we are. We're a kind of pit crew for these kids. So when the kid's giving me the thumbs up and he's saying to his dad, see, I told you I wasn't faking, and the dad's kind of going, oh man. He was feeling bad because he was yelling at his kid. His heat was too high. So I'm a reluctant labeler. I'm not the biggest, just personally and professionally, not the biggest fan of it, but I understand that in order for you to get service and that people do want it and need it in their own way, that I provide it where I think I can. But if I do think a kid's in first grade and I haven't determined yet whether he's going to get on the road, if we give him the right instruction, I'm going to say, look, let's watch and wait and see. And we'll revisit it a little bit later, not way down the road, but we're going to start doing the right things early. Okay? Yes?
I'd like to know your top 3 classroom accommodations that you find are most successful, as well as any confidence builders, like your example of the plant waterer.
That's a big one for me. Time becomes a big one, you know. But, you know, how many kids want extra time, frankly? They want less time. They don't know what we're working on, especially when they have a little bit of attention deficit in the mix. They are like, I want to be done with this. So I think one accommodation would be to reduce the workload. I think that reducing it some and really recognizing that I may be asking too much of this child is a huge accommodation. I think that I go back to what I said earlier about finding a couple of strengths. It's not quite an accommodation, but it's a way to get the kid feeling more connected, you know, the battery charging kind of thing. I've said it again before, but I think big words kill these kids. And finding ways to help them with big words. Find any way you can to help them with these tough words, the low frequency words. Just assume it. You know, 3rd grade and up. Even 1st and 2nd grade, frankly. Parents brought me in a 1st grade text the other day from one of the typical series. And I'm like, wow, a word like squeak. You know, that's not a hard, squeak. That's a hard word for dyslexics. They're reading a squawk, squawk, you know. That was in a 1st grade level book, you know. So that's one. Certainly time. I was being glib about time. But I think, a lot of these kids are painfully slow. You know, that boy I showed you earlier today, the first boy, and that kid is working at quadruple speed in terms of his processing speed and his outputs. So he needs to be reassured that the time element that's being imposed is not going to cause him a nervous breakdown, frankly, or that he's going to fail, so I think that is important too. But I would be careful. I would sort of piggyback on be careful. There's a lot of cookie cutter accommodations out there, if you know what I mean. Like there were a lot of ones that are just the typical 5 things that we do. Try to individualize it, like really as a mom or as a teacher, ask yourself, what does this kid need to help him get in the game more? Because that's what accommodations are supposed to be, I think. The idea is that they're leveling a playing field, It's not, the idea is that if I'm operating on a playing field that's not level, what can I do to smooth the road or level the playing field? What will this individual kid's needs be that, so let them be organic. And I find too often 504 meetings are much more rubber stamp, typical accommodations. Did you give me a huzzah? No, yeah, all right. We joked before during lunch, that was about.
I just want to speak as a parent. So in regards to dyslexia, it's not isolated. It's not this isolated piece. Oftentimes our kids have multiple challenges that they're dealing with. And as a parent, you step into those IEPs and you're like, I don't even know half the acronyms that they're talking about. And I really don't understand what it is they're asking, or they're telling me that they're going to do to support my child, but I am signing at the bottom saying, yes, I agree with that. What resources are available that are out there, that are available, and they're appropriate resources? I mean, you can go searching on the internet for hours, and there's stuff that's not that great.
Yeah,
Do you know of resources?
Eric, right? Eric, right?
Yeah.
Eric, yeah. Eric, you're speaking my language in the sense of, I think parents are overwhelmed by this. I think that it's unfortunate that, parents come out oftentimes from IEP meetings feeling traumatized, and I think that it could be a lot more sensitively done in the sense of walking people through what, I'll try to help. If I said to you, and the kid got an 8 in similarities, well, what does that mean? You need to understand the scores. You need to understand. There's a lot of great books on the market for this. I could help you out with that later on. Understood.org is a really good website. I think they put out great, websites like Reading Horizons, Reading Rockets, I would just start with a few of those. There's some, and there's some really good books that, Dr. Bratton, Bratten, she wrote a book on psychological testing, and she wrote a second book on processing speed issues. So there's a ton of stuff out there. But I agree with you fully that, tossing around these acronyms and you're right, Eric, that these kids are complicated, and they frequently are seeing neurologists or seeing this, and they're getting these multiple diagnoses, and it can be very complicated and complicating.
So I think one of the biggest things, and again, I could be dead off, but dealing with a child that has dyslexia, dealing with a husband that had dyslexia, didn't know until the child got diagnosed, was thrown in special ed, felt stupid all of his life. I think we have to stop treating it like it's a disease. It can be a huge gift, and focusing on the gifts of dyslexia instead of classifying it into this problem thing can be a huge mind changer.
What's your first name?
Aline.
Aline, I think you're right in many respects, and I think Charles Schwab, the Schwab website years ago, he went into a psychologist, brought his kid in for an evaluation. This is what I understand the story to be, and they did an evaluation on him, and Charles Schwab's son was dyslexic, and he described the characteristics, and he went, I was that way, and he set up a foundation, the Schwab Learning Foundation. That also was a good one to go on.
I'm a special educator, and I often get emails and have participated in a conference that involved the Utah Parent Center, where I think that parents may be able to take classes in the IEP process. Also, I would like to suggest that you, as has been suggested before, that when you don't understand the words that some of the members of the team are using, you say, can you explain to me what that means in plain language?
Yeah, I think that's great. I train people to go, remember Columbo, the detective? Go Columbo. I see this word here, scratch your head a lot. I see this thing called a 504, like help me out here. What is that again? And what's the difference between an IEP and a 504? And I don't know, how do I get it? And be real dumb. Columbo was great at being dumb. It was beautiful, and he got it. So, Aileen, one point that I want to get back to on that is, yes, it's a gift. There's a gift. I know the gift of, but there's the other side of that I know some other people who are doing some trainings in dyslexia, that there's a lot of pain too. And it's why I think that the emphasizing, and what I've stressed for both the keynote now, is to get that gift in there. But we have to not lose sight of how painful it is.
But I think for me as a parent, it was like, oh, like the kid said, see, I wasn't faking. It's like, oh, okay, this is what you have, yes. This is how we vote.
And you also touched on, and again, I'm moving into almost like family dynamics. And we said it's family by family, kid by, and there are a lot of stereotypical behaviors going on. The guys are being guys a lot of times, and they're being like, oh, aren't you overreacting or whatever? Because usually I have found that the moms are the drivers of the engine, with this stuff, and it's hard to get some of the dads on board with it. How much time do we have for more questions? I'm not even sure where we are. One more question. All right. Who has the...
I've been to some trainings with the colored paper and the colored overlays. But I haven't heard any of that through this morning.
I was actually trained, I should be careful again because it's going worldwide, years ago in scotopic sensitivity. I worked at the Eye Institute in Philadelphia. And the Eye Institute was pretty progressive, and there was an optometry college, but they recognized that the optometrists were not really meeting all the needs. So they brought in a couple of psychologists. So we had a great learning disability center there. And at the time, again, I'm dating myself one more, her name was Helen Erlin, the Erlin lenses. They were very popular a couple decades ago. So you would see people walking around like they were in like the Sex Pistols, with these lenses or something, like they'd be putting on punk rock glasses like orange lenses, literally. But you would get lensed. Now, I haven't heard about it. She went on 60 Minutes and she made a claim that, she can take care of, significant amount of reading problems with these lenses. I got trained in it because we were doing research. what I have found over the years is that there's every once in a while there's a child who come down the pike who seems to show signs of some kind of straining with visual tracking type of experiences. And I'm not exactly talking about reading, but that there's a discomfort with the reading process that can't fully be explained by the decoding issues, if you see what I'm saying. And I have seen I don't know why, putting a light blue tint over the kid's page. I always found the light blue tint to be, like to smooth it out. So this is just a belief. I'm not basing, I do know some of the science behind it, but I don't even want to talk about it. That my sense is that there are kids who are sensitive to the interaction of fluorescent light on the page, and they just, they can't, that by putting down those tints smooths it out. I will make an occasional reference for an optometrist to evaluate a kid if I get a host of characteristics that are weighing in that there's a visual contribution, not that that's necessarily explaining why the decoding is faulty. And I'll be sure that I tell parents that if he does get some kind of visual treatment, that's not going to be like, aha, the reading is fixed. It's focusing on another level of, the eye function, the eye teaming. So I thank you. I appreciate the time, and thank Reading Horizons and whoever else is watching it. And thank you.
The team here at Reading Horizons would like to thank Dr. Richard Selznick for his excellent presentation. If you registered for this summit, you'll receive an email with all of the presentations, the slide decks, and you'll be able to request certificates of attendance. You will also receive a survey where you can give feedback on this presentation and let us know what webcasts you'd like to see in the future. So keep an eye on your inbox. Also, be sure to stay in touch for more information on our next webcast. It will be posted on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, then shared on YouTube. So we encourage you to like and subscribe to be alerted to this great content as soon as it's available. If you registered for this webcast, you'll also receive an email invitation. We want to thank all of you for joining us today. For any questions about the Reading Horizons program, please contact us at 800-333-0054 or visit our website, www.readinghorizons.com. Fill out the Talk to a Specialist form on our site to schedule a full demo. Thank you and have a great evening.